Let's take a little speaking section tour. So this is what the speaking section begins with. You have this task to adjust the microphone. So they want to adjust the microphone volume. That's why before you're super stressed during the exam, they want you to actually describe the city you live in. So I know you are very stressed because you're going to have a speaking section. So you see they just checked my volume and the audio volume is acceptable. But you see I wasn't describing the city I live in, right? I was just talking whatever I was talking about. So here in this task, it always begins before you begin your speaking section. They always want to adjust the volume of your microphone. And they give you a task so that you can speak about something and then can measure the value of the microphone. However, you don't have to describe the city you live in. So save your energy for those questions that will happen later, right? So those questions which are important for your speaking score. This has nothing to do with your speaking score. This is only to measure your microphone volume. Nobody is going to record you and nobody is going to listen to it. So instead of actually describing the city that you live in and losing all that energy to something unimportant, instead just read this sentence. Just say, describe the city you live in, 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 and keep going until they tell you that, okay, your microphone volume is great. So don't really try to make up something, to create a story about the city you live in. It's always this task to describe the city you live in. So just keep reading it. Just keep reading it, and then they will adjust the microphone volume, okay? So this is how the section starts. They ask you to describe the city you live in, you just keep repeating the same sentence. Then you're receiving some directions, and then they move you to the first question. So they will give you some instructions. You see this girl, and they will talk about, okay, so this is question number 1. And then after it, you will see, this is the first question, you will see this question. So describe changes in technology that have affected your life and explain what effect they have had on you as a student. And also this sentence is always the same. Include details and examples to support your explanation. And so now you see that we looked at this sentence for a while before they gave us a preparation time of 15 seconds. So actually you have a little bit more time because they are going to read you out loud this question, then they're going to read that you need to include details and examples to support your explanation, and then they will give you 15 seconds. So you have a little bit more time than 15 seconds to prepare your response. And then after you finished your 15 seconds of preparation, there will be response time, which is 45 seconds. And so you see this little countdown, and you need to speak during 45 seconds and answer this question. So after you answered this question, we're going to question number 2. This is question number 2. Again, we see this girl and we hear some directions about what's going to happen. And then we see this question. What kind of friend is better? One who is very similar to you, or one who is very different? Which kind of friend do you prefer and why? And again, our favorite sentence, include details and examples in your explanation. And then you see that the time is still not ticking because they're extremely slow in reading this sentence for you. So you have a lot of time to read it twice or 3 times, or to start preparing a little bit earlier, right? So you have a little bit more than 15 seconds here because you're going to read it much faster than they're thinking. So after the preparation time is over, we will have 45 seconds to respond. And then we are going to answer the third question. So this is the third question, again, the girl, and then here we have a text. We have 45 seconds to read the text, and we have a little timer here. And you see that the text is pretty small. It's just 1 paragraph. It's usually an announcement on campus, like something going on, something new, some new things that they decided to establish on campus, and there's a note about it, or like an announcement. So we need to read it during 45 seconds. Usually 45 seconds is more than enough. So the text is small, so we have a lot of time to read it. And after we read the text, once this timer is over and it's 00, we listen to a dialogue. It looks like that. So we have these 2 students, they're discussing the announcement, so they talk about it. They're probably really angry. How could they do it to us? So we hate this new announcement. We hate this new policy. So they're talking and discussing it. You need to take a lot of notes because you're going to later tell what happened. So you take a lot of notes, you listen to what they're saying, and then after you're done with listening, you will see the question. The question is always the same. The man expresses his opinion about whether the woman should attend the job fair, state his opinion, explain the reasons he gives for his opinion. So the question basically always asks you, okay, tell us what happened, right? So tell us what was in the announcement and tell us what the students were talking about. And sometimes the man, for example, is like more a leader of the conversation. So he talks much more. And the lady, for example, is less active in the conversation. So that is why they're asking what did the man say, because he was telling about his opinion a lot. So often there's a leader in the conversation and they're asking about what this leader had in mind and what he was talking about. But basically every time we're answering this question, it is just tell us what was happening in the reading, what was happening in the listening. Okay, so this is the third question. It's always a dialogue. It's always an announcement on campus, then a dialogue and student discuss, and then we need to say what was in the reading and what the students talked about. So after we are done with the third question, we are moved to the fourth question. Again, we see the girl, some directions, and then again we see a text, but now it's an academic text. The text is pretty easy, so there's nothing crazy here going on. Mathematics and children's misconceptions, so this is a pretty easy text about the difficulties that children have with mathematics and why they're having these difficulties, right? So it's a pretty easy text, no crazy scientific material or something, it's pretty easy. And we again have 45 seconds to read this one paragraph. So imagine if this is a paragraph from a textbook, right? So you're reading a paragraph, a small paragraph from a textbook, and then after it, the lecturer starts to comment that paragraph. So she explains it more. So now we see this beautiful lecturer and she's describing the details that should be added to the explanation. So she's explaining the concept more. So she gives more examples, she just makes it all more clear. So we always have a paragraph, let's say from a textbook, and then a lecturer who is elaborating that text, so who is telling us more details about it, more examples, so makes it more understandable. So after we hear her lecture, we of course take a lot of notes, this is very important. Then we see the question. The question basically always asks you, okay, what was the text about, what was the lecture about, right? So, well, it is phrased differently. The professor describes the mistakes that are made in teaching children mathematics, explain how these mistakes relate to the problems that children have in understanding fractions. So this part, the problems, it is taken from the text, right? So the problems that children have in understanding fractions, it is what the text talked about. Mistakes that teachers do in teaching children mathematics, it was what the lecture talked about. So basically this question asks you, okay, how the mistakes that the lecturer described relate to the problems that were described in the text. Okay, so it's always about, okay, tell us what was in the text, what was in the listening. So we have, again, 30 seconds to prepare our response. If you did a lot of notes, then you'll be fine. It's okay. And then we have 60 seconds to respond. Okay, so then after we're done with this response, we are moved to question number 5. So again, we see the girl, directions, and then we don't have a text anymore. It immediately starts with a dialogue. Number 5 is always a dialogue. Now 2 students are talking, and then one student usually has some kind of a problem. And then the other student is giving him some solutions. And then another student is like, no, I don't want to do that. Oh, that's a good option. Okay, I think I will do that. So they're discussing some problem and some solutions. After that, we have the question. So usually we have to summarize what we just heard. So we have to tell everything we heard in the dialogue. And then we also need to give our opinion. If we had this problem, what would we do? So this question also asks you for your opinion. You have 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. And then after you are done with the 5th question, you are going to answer the last question, the 6th question. So again, there's a girl. And again, there's no text. There's just listening going straight ahead. So we see this professor, he's telling us something, some kind of lecture. This is usually a pretty advanced lecture. It's a little bit more difficult than the lecture which was in the 4th question. This one is a little bit harder. And then after we listen to it, we again have a very simple question like, all right, tell us what you understood, what happened, what did the professor talk about. So then you have 20 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to speak. So this is what the speaking section looks like. We did a little tour, and of course we're going to discuss every single question, and I will give you exact tools to how to cope with every one of them. Thanks for watching.